Hello and welcome again to another edition of the Our Coaching Network football podcast. I am John Brice of footballscoop.com, joined today by Duquesne head coach Jerry Schmitt. Coach, welcome to the show. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Well, thank you for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Going to be a fun visit, and we get all ages and types of coaches here on the program. That's one of the things I like the most about it. You've got 20 years as a head coach. You're a Pennsylvania native. That's really special, but 20 years is remarkable, especially in this current environment. So right off the top, I want to ask two things. What's the secret to that kind of longevity, and how much have you seen this game change over the 2 decades that you've been in charge of the program?
Yeah, you know, the secret is to have good players and good staff for a consistent basis for a long time to be able to stay at one place, to have them want you to keep coming back. And to be at a place that you have great support and you really enjoy going to work every single day. Obviously, us football coaches enjoy working with the student athletes and working the football part of it, but the outside part of it, the administrative part, the people you have to deal with on campus, it's really a pleasure to go to work every day here at Duquesne. And I just felt, this being my hometown, it was a place that I wanted to stay and try to build a program. And I've been here I was an assistant here for a while. In the 80s, a couple years in the 80s and a couple years in the 90s. As a part-time assistant. Back those days, we were Division III in the 80s and 1AA non-scholarship in the 90s. And I was a high school math teacher and part-time coach. So I've seen this thing grow from club football in the 70s to Division III to 1AA non-scholarship, now 1AA scholarship. And so I just, wanted to stay here and help grow this program. And, I guess that's been the secret.
That's pretty remarkable. Along those lines of the secret, then, and you talk about the changes within your program, but for the changes in the game, they've been phenomenal over the past 2 decades as well, which obviously speaks to you as a coach because you couldn't keep having the success that you've had, a dozen conference championships, even more than that in terms of winning seasons, if you weren't able to adapt and evolve. So what has been the key for you adapting and evolving in all the changes of the game?
Yeah, I think you have to study the game. You have to watch what other teams are doing, what other people are doing. Uh, big learn. I love going to learn, not only clinics and schemes, and I love just going to visit other schools and seeing what they're doing, operations on the field. Have a lot of connections, talk to a lot of people, how the trends are going, and just trying to anticipate with what we have here to put ourselves in the best situation. And yes, there's been a lot of changes, and I think it's the way you approach it, our staff approach it. We say this to our kids say it, our staff says it. We just adjust. We say Dukes adjust because things happen. In the
Yeah.
landscape of college football, things happen here on campus. We don't have all the resources the bigger schools have. Sometimes we're scheduled to have a meeting at a classroom across campus, and all of a sudden, there's a calculus class there that nobody told us about. And so we kind of walk around the building, find an open room, and the kids don't get upset. They just go, okay, let's go in there. And so we do that with everything, and we do it with this landscape of college football, how it's changed. We were fortunate before, the transfer portal. We benefited here in Western Pennsylvania from transfers. This is a fertile football area, Western PA, Northeast Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia area. And so when young men would play at other schools and things didn't work out and wanted to come home, we benefited from that. So before the portal, we probably had approximately anywhere from 5 to 10 FBS transfers on our team each year. And the thing back then was you couldn't you had to transfer down to be eligible right away.
Right.
And we took advantage of that. And so when the portal came in, that was nothing new for us as far as balancing, a few transfers with the incoming freshman class and developing that team in that regard. And the difference was obviously now everybody in the country is aware of every single um, person that goes in that transfer portal. Back in those days, we have a lot of connections with high school coaches, with college coaches, and we'd get a call and young man's not happy or wants to play a different position or wants to come home, and we would get that recommendation, and we'd almost have that thing secured before anybody knew he was transferring, and now everybody in the country knows about it. But we utilized what we did back then now to make those adjustments.
Gotcha. He is Duquesne head coach Jerry Schmitt. I am John Brice of footballscoop.com. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. That leads me directly into my next question. You don't last 20 years. You don't have all the winning seasons that you've had. If you're not a developmental program, you do a great job of developing players. So you already touched on the transfer portal, but how are you managing it now that, as you reference, everybody knows who's in that portal and people can come and try to cherry pick out of your program? So what's your approach there?
We just always want to do what's in the best interest of the young men, the student athletes that we teach and coach. That's always been the philosophy here, and I tell them that I'll do anything I can to help you be a better football player, a better student, a better person. And it's always, we'll do anything we can, everything we can. We'll help you. You have to help yourself, obviously. And then the only time that would stop is when it affects the entire team.
Right.
And they understand that decisions made for the entire team could affect them. So we approach it the exact same way. When young men think about transferring or going in the portal, I sit down with them and what's in your best interest? And I give my honest opinion, and they have theirs, and there's a lot of outside influences. And we understand that could happen. And we have examples of young men that have gone to other schools and it hasn't worked out as well for them. And then we've had some that go and it does work out for them. And I cite those examples to the young men and try to help them make good decisions. And then in that process, we understand that could happen. We've had a number of young men that come in, and we were fortunate to get them as a freshman because there was something they needed to develop in their game, size, quickness, maturity, things of those natures. And it happened here. We do a really good job of acclimating our young guys and teaching them, developing them across the board. And then they've gone to other schools, but we understand that's going to happen. So we just have to plan and continue to develop and teach. I talk to my guys all the time in camp. We need to be teaching those incoming freshmen or those redshirt freshmen that are down on the depth chart. Now we need to be putting them forefront, putting them in situations, because by the time the end of the season comes and we're in conference play, and you might need one of those guys to be on a punt team or a kickoff team or get a few reps on offense or defense that could make the difference in a championship run. And so we try to do our best to teach every young man as best we can, starting with the first day of camp.
That's really, I appreciate that insight. Thank you for sharing that approach with us. You touched on something a moment ago about your relationships with high school coaches there, and high school football is excellent in Pennsylvania. And as I studied your roster to prepare for this podcast, I noticed you've got obviously a very heavy presence of Pennsylvania natives on your roster. How have you fostered those relationships through the high school coaches in the state of Pennsylvania? And obviously, how important is that for you and your program, both from because you want those kids in your program, but you also want it to be an organic program?
Yeah, it was really it was pretty easy for me when I went from being a high school math teacher of 17 years and then moving into being a college coach, because I worked all those camps. I coached at a couple different high schools through my career there, uh, and went to clinics and developed relationships with all the. I actually coached girls basketball too for a while there, and so I was all over Western Pennsylvania as a teacher and a coach, and then I was coaching at Duquesne too in some of those years. So I had good relationships not only with coaches, administration. We used to joke um, when they sent me out, when I'd go out recruiting, I was a very inefficient recruiter because I would go out to a school and I'd be in there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, because I had to go say hello to the secretary that I knew and the custodian I knew and, a couple teachers I knew or just some relationships. So I'd maybe hit two schools a day where sometimes you got to get to five or six, but those relationships paid off at times over the years. And we get calls all the time from those relationships that were developed personally myself and throughout my staff. Hey, this young man is interested, great young man. We get some extra information um, because of those relationships. So it was easier for me early. It's tougher now, sitting in this seat and developing this program to where it is for me to get out. I don't like to miss any of the recruiting nights and any of those things. I get out as best I can, and it is changing too. Now that I'm where I'm at in age and been in this a long time, it's tougher for me to keep up with the changes of the coaches staff here locally or, Northeast Ohio and West Virginia areas because it's constantly changing and more I understand the landscape in high school. No longer are there as many teachers that are coaching. It's guys that are in business or in some other form of employment that show up. So it's harder when you show up to the school. They might not be in the building. But those high school coaches do a great job because they want the best for their players also.
What you referenced there, authenticity and relationships, you can't put a price tag on that. That's obvious. That's a bedrock of your program. I mentioned off camera. I'll mention it now. I got to meet one of your former players this week in Chicago at a speaking event. Ryan Grady. I mentioned I'm friends with Mickey Jacobs. I met him when he was on staff at Pittsburgh. We met in AFCA a few years ago. We've even shared an Uber to the airport to fly back to our respective homes. Congratulated him as he's welcomed in new members of his family. I just wonder what it's like for you when you have a guy like Mickey that comes back and is working with you and is on your staff, or when you hear of your former players that are having success out in the business world, or you get those invitations to weddings or birth announcements, things of that nature. Just what does all that mean to you?
That means the world to me. It's the most important to me. It's about the relationships that you develop with your staff and these young people to help them. Hopefully, as many as we can have a good experience, whatever level, if they were a superstar or if they were a guy that was on the special teams that helped and played 4 years, got their degree, like that means the world to me. I'd trade any championships for those relationships because to me, that's what it's all about. And when you flip that around, if you can do that, and we talk about this with our staff, is developing relationships with our players, um, that in turn will help you win championships. I firmly believe that's what it's all about. We work with our players. Uh, as I said, I was a teacher for 17 years, and I learned my craft from about teaching and coaching in those 17 years. I learned from some great teachers. I was in the building with some great teachers and legendary coaches, high school coaches. I was so fortunate to work with those people because I just picked up everything they did. But I say to my staff, it's the relationships we develop with these young people that they will gain trust in us and we'll be able to work with them. It's not us telling them what to do. We guide them. We work with them. They ask questions. They give their opinions. And then it's our job to put us in the best position for them to be successful and our team to be successful.
Wrapping up here, a couple more questions with Duquesne head coach Jerry Schmitt. I'm John Brice of footballscoop.com. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. Okay, I've got to ask you, you made reference to the 17 years of being a math teacher, um, but you also revealed that you're a former girls basketball coach. So what is the best thing you took from girls basketball coaching into college football coaching?
That I have to be able to adjust to the student athlete. Uh, it was many fond years. And I tell the story all the time. I was coaching at Duquesne at the time. I was a math teacher, and I would drive down here and crazy how we developed that program under Coach Gattuso, who's now up at Albany. He was the head coach. I was the offensive coordinator as a part-time coach. That's where we were trying to build this program. But it was kind of crazy. I would get done in November, on a Saturday, our last game, and Monday I started basketball. So I was walking, I was working with sometimes 22-year-old young men. And then on Monday, I walk in the gym at 3 o'clock and there's a 14-year-old ninth grade basketball player ready to practice. And that difference in learning how to adapt and adjust and get the most out and help those young ladies get better at what they're doing and develop. And I still have one of my former players' daughter is in med school here at Duquesne, and she works for us as a manager for our
Oh,
program.
wow.
And it's that there's that tie-in in those relationships, and it's awesome. And she does a great job. I'm so happy to have her here.
I'm going to go ahead and bet that that's the only program in college football anywhere that has that dynamic. That's great, coach. All right. Last one on your current team. You're coming off a huge road win against a ranked Youngstown team. So you're 1-0 against FCS opposition. You had a couple of tough FBS games to open the season. What do you like about this team? What do you want this team's identity to be in 2024?
So proud of them, what they did. Tough, tough going on the road 3 weeks in a row and going to those schools, those FBS schools, and challenging ourselves and those results. They got some resilience in them, and they're listening to. It doesn't matter, just play the next play. It doesn't matter who we're playing, and focus on ourselves. I really like. I just said it the other day. We went out to practice and we ran this drill, and there were some guys. We're in the middle of game week here, and I mean we're driving them to run up and down the field a couple times. Guys were jumping on the punt return, and there wasn't a complaint. There was no complaint. That's after they did their offense and their defense and everything else. And um, they just have resilience. They want to learn, and they're focused on us. And like I didn't more so than many of our teams. Sometimes you have to really drill that in and keep drilling it in. This one is accepting it. What they did up at Youngstown, it was great. Just stayed in the moment each play and did a great job. So happy for them.
Coach, you're incredibly kind. And as you mentioned, game week, you've got a lot going on. So can't thank you enough for visiting with us. He is Jerry Schmitt, Duquesne head coach. Thanks again for joining us. I'm John Brice of Football Scoop. This has been the Our Coaching Network podcast. Coach, good luck the rest of the way.
Appreciate it, John. Have a great day.